In a quiet little town surrounded by sleepy hills and rustling tamarind trees lived a 14-year-old boy named Anand. He wasn't extraordinary. He wasn't the topper. He wasn't the star sportsman. He was just the boy who sat on the last bench, not because he chose to, but because he believed that's where he belonged. Every day he walked into class quietly, clutching his old school bag. He wasn't hated, just invisible. Teachers rarely noticed him, classmates barely spoke to him, and he lived inside a small shell of silence. But behind the silence was a boy with dreams so fragile that even a small failure could shatter them. Every evening at home, Anand lived with his mother in a small rented home. She worked long hours at a garment shop, stitching clothes under the dim yellow light of a tiny bulb. Every evening she would come home tired, yet smiling. She cooked, cleaned, and still found the strength to sit beside Anand. She would gently place her hand on his head and say, "You don't have to be the best. Just become your best." Anand always smiled, but deep inside he never believed those words. He thought, things like success, those are not for people like me. The announcement that changed everything. One Monday morning, their science teacher walked in holding a stack of papers. "Students, this year we have a science model competition at the district level. Winners go to the state exhibition." The class buzzed with excitement. But Anand? He sat silently, his fingers curling into the edge of his desk. The teacher handed out forms. Anand accepted it, but instead of filling it out, he quietly folded it and slipped it into his bag. Days passed. The form remained untouched. The night of the unsaid. The deadline night arrived. Anand stared at the empty form on his table. His mother noticed the silence. She walked to him and asked softly, "Why haven't you filled it?" Anand looked down. "I don't want people to laugh at me again." His voice trembled. There was a long pause. His mother didn't lecture him. She didn't say he was wrong. She simply walked outside. After a moment, she returned holding a tiny wildflower plucked from beside the old fence. She placed it gently in his palm, the flower that spoke. She said, "Do you know why this flower is beautiful?" Anand shook his head. "Because it bloomed in a place where nobody would ever look. Not in a garden, not near a window, just beside an old wall. Still, it bloomed." Anand looked at the flower. His mother placed her fingers beneath his chin and lifted his head. "You may be on the last bench, but your bench does not decide your worth. Your effort does." For the first time in months, Anand felt something spark inside. Not confidence, not courage, but hope. The making of a dream. That night, Anand gently cleared his table. He lit a small lamp and gathered old materials. Bottle caps, wires, cardboard pieces, broken toys. He had no fancy equipment, no new tools, no expensive kits. But he had heart. Every night for the next 1 week, he worked until his eyes burned from tiredness. He cut, he glued, he adjusted, he failed. He tried again. Sometimes the turbine blades fell off. Sometimes the bulb didn't glow. Sometimes his hands shook from fear and exhaustion. But the little wildflower lay on his table beside him, reminding him, bloom anyway. The first glow. On the final night, when Anand connected the last wire and turned the blade, the small light bulb glowed softly. His heart stopped for a second. Tears filled his eyes. The room was dark, but that tiny bulb was enough to light his entire world. The competition day. The hall was filled with bright, colorful models, solar machines, working robots, mini waterfalls, battery cars. Anand walked in holding his small recycled turbine. Some students giggled. "Garbage project? Why waste time, Anand? Last bench boy wants to win?" Anand felt small, but then he remembered the wildflower resting in his pocket. He placed his model on the table and stood behind it. The judging judges moved from table to table. They hardly looked at some models. They asked questions at others. When they reached Anand's model, one judge asked, "Made from recycled items?" Anand nodded nervously. His hands trembled. Another judge pressed the switch. The tiny turbine spun. The bulb lit up. It wasn't bright. It wasn't flashy. But it was real. And it worked. Silence filled the hall. Then whispers. Whoa! Did he make that? From scrap? But Anand heard none of it. He only saw his mother standing far near the door, watching with shining eyes. The announcement. At the end of the event, the teacher walked onto the stage holding the result sheet. The hall waited. First prize, for innovation, creativity, and effective use of recycled materials, goes to Anand! Cheers echoed through the hall. Some students clapped, some stared, some were speechless. But Anand, he stood frozen, tears filling his eyes. He walked up to the stage trembling, and when he received the trophy, he finally saw his mother. She covered her mouth with her sari palu, tears rolling down her cheeks. The hug that said everything. Anand ran to her. She hugged him tightly, whispering, See? Even the last bench has a future. Anand cried in her arms. Not out of pain, not out of fear, but out of the joy that comes from realizing, I can do it. I'm worth something. The new beginning. That night, Anand placed the trophy on his study table. Beside it, he gently placed the dried wildflower. He whispered, Thank you for teaching me to bloom. From that day forward, Anand was never the last bench boy again. Not because he moved benches, but because he finally stood up inside himself. He studied with confidence. He answered in class. He built new models. He stopped hiding because one little flower and one mother who believed changed his entire life. Moral of the story, you don't need the front bench to shine. You don't need perfect tools to create. You don't need the world to believe in you. You just need one reason to believe in yourself. Even if the world forgets you, even if your spot is small, even if no one looks your way, bloom anyway.